let's get this going. Let me share my screen. Let everybody know, hey, what's going on, Snowflake? Snowflake. Let me just put the link in the chat here. We are live. I'm recording this. I'll upload it to YouTube after the event is over. If you're here in the Discord, you get to see it. Otherwise, you're gonna have to wait. Then you'll see it on YouTube, and then you'll be behind. Give me 1 second here. I'm just trying to get the link to the channel. All right, there we go. Junjun, what's going on, buddy? Happy Sunday. We got holiday tomorrow in the market, and schools are closed, so all that's going on. You are indeed the first Snowflake. Congrats. Good job. We'll give everyone else just a minute or two to roll in, and then we'll get rock and rolling like we always do. You are first and second. Yes, good job. Because nobody is here to dispute it or challenge the crown. So you want to go for third? Oh, no, it's too late, Junjun. Second slot is filled. You have to be third. There's no way around it. Oh, you took it. Sorry, buddy. Snowflake came up and stole the top 3 spots. Hey, Elizabeth. How's it going? Just caught our shenanigans. Just giving everyone another minute or two. Just figured we'd... Snowflake. Just being ourselves here. So this live stream, this webinar, is obviously... skipping ahead there. This is for everybody. So it doesn't matter if you are a business owner, if you made millions in the stock market, if you just got out of prison and you're starting fresh. It does not matter. You know, single parent, whatever. College kid, high schooler, just trying to get into the job market, just trying to figure out what money is. Does not matter. So first and foremost, got to put the disclaimer out there, obviously. I don't want to get, taken to prison if... if I don't have a disclaimer on here. This is for educational and informational purposes only. It's part of my umbrella dollar depth community, but this one is just a free live stream because the foundation should always be free. And I just want people to understand how money works, because I think once you understand how money works, it becomes very easy to use it to your advantage. And if you haven't had that education, well, you're kind of at a disadvantage just from stuff that you don't know. So we're going to fix some of that today. Obviously, there are always financial risks. Anytime you pick up $1 or get $1, you risk losing it. So you got to be very careful when it comes to how you use your money. So this is just education. I want you guys to just take the information I'm giving you, scrutinize the hell out of it. Does it make sense to you? Does it seem like something that can work for you? Just like on the stock market side, and then take what works for you and adapt it to your budget, your circumstances. I don't have the full picture of what your finances look like. So let's just consider this educational purposes only, right? So let's get rock and rolling. Obviously, for tax stuff, consult a tax professional. For legal stuff, consult a legal professional. There's going to be a lot of state-based nuance that I just don't have information to help you out with. So let's get started. Our mission today is going to be to introduce you to the basics of budgeting. And we're going to build out a mock budget there towards the end, but I want to make sure we understand how to get from A to B first, okay? And to establish a solid understanding of money flow within your personal finances. So money flow is just money comes in, it's allocated for something, and then money goes out, right? Your money, by default, belongs to whoever asks for it first. And that's something we need to fix, especially in this economy. So we're going to go through 9 sections, basically. So the first one's going to be financial mastery elements. That's just kind of the framework that we're going to use. 2 is going to be gaining visibility. So we're going to work through, the importance and the practical way of building your visibility out so that you know where your money is. Then we're going to install a money flow framework. So we're going to talk about what money flow is and wealth versus income. Then we're going to talk about major recurring. Those are your expenses that are larger and more impactful to your budget. Then we're going to talk about the minor recurring hierarchy. And then outflow management so that you can make the most efficient use of your dollars. Then we're going to walk through how to reduce expenses. Then we're going to compare inflow versus outflow, and I'm going to walk through some examples of kind of where things get categorized so it's a little bit less vague. A lot of us are just kind of introduced to money and then left to fend for ourselves, right? A lot of parents, a lot of schools, they don't really teach the specifics, right? They just say, here's a bunch of things, here's a bunch of topics, here's a bunch of concepts. It's up to you to figure out how they actually work, though. So good luck, have fun, and we'll be here when you struggle to collect our fees. So yeah, thrown to the wolves, exactly. And then we're just going to wrap it up with the big three and just kind of go through some Q&A, and then we're going to build out our mock budget, and I think you guys will hopefully have a pretty good time. So let's go ahead and move to financial mastery elements. It's not public speaking mastery, it's financial mastery. We're going to talk about visibility, outflow reduction, the credit engine, and breaking the chain. And this is kind of where we start to shake things up a little bit. So when it comes to visibility, that is an absolute must. You must know what's going on with your money if you want to be efficient with it. And I'm going to tie that into things like stealth expenses as well, which we just don't we don't care about until we care about it. My goal is to open your eyes enough so that you're not sacrificing your lifestyle, but you will be aware of the things that are chipping away at your financial stability and getting in the way of that long-term growth that you want. So we're going to define some clear objectives, obstacles, and the desired outcome for your money so that we have a goal to go with that plan. And then we're going to monitor it over time. And that's what the Budget Builders program is for, so that you guys can all, kind of assign almost a metric score to your financial efficiency. And again, without dipping into your lifestyle. We don't want anyone choosing whether or not, protein in your diet is a necessity. Like, don't go that far. It's not worth it. And then reducing your outflow. We're going to talk about how to reach, your magic number. What is your magic number and how can you get there? Reducing your recurring expenses first before you have to potentially dip in your lifestyle is critical because, like we talk about on the stock side, I don't want to pay more than I have to. And we'll dig into all this stuff. But when it comes to taxes, I don't want to pay more than I should because I'm not getting more for it. I'm not getting more roads. I'm not getting more representation. I'm not getting more voting rights. So why would I pay the IRS more when there's a better way and there's pathways to make it cheaper for myself? I'm not going to feel bad about depriving the IRS of some of my hard-earned money. And the same works with companies. If you're paying these giant corporations for services, subscriptions, things like that, why pay more than you have to get the same stuff? All right. So that's an avenue that we're going to explore. Then the credit engine, that kind of ties into the credit climbers thing, but it is still important because, if you don't have a good credit score, if you don't have a credit score at all, or maybe you have like a thin credit file, whatever your circumstances are, there is a very definitive poor tax that comes with having a less than like 760 credit score. So again, why would you pay more than you have to when there's a better way? It also helps you be more liquid. It makes you have better access to money flow when you have a higher credit worthiness to these companies. Okay, and it goes beyond just money. Like you can be denied renting an apartment or getting a job, or when I went in the Army, I wasn't able to get security clearance because I didn't have a credit score because I just paid cash for everything. And we're also going to dispel the notion that it costs money to build credit because that is a lie. It's a generational lie. There's ways to do it for free and even get paid while you're doing it. So it's just stuff that you don't know, I'm assuming. And we can fix all that just by sharing some information. And then we're going to learn how to break the chain, that generational chain where we're just given a set of beliefs and perspectives, and that turns into habits and commitments that we don't necessarily need to maintain all the time, and we can be a little bit more prepared. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Full visibility. This is where it all starts. You have to know what's going on with your money, okay? And this is especially important for people that have a lot of things going on. If you're in the court system, maybe you got child support, alimony, maybe you got some wage garnishments, maybe you have restitution, whatever your circumstances are, you have to track those separately. If you have multiple jobs, you want to track those separately. If you have multiple forms of income, like let's say you own a business or you're in the stock market or you have a 401k or any number of things, you have to know where your money is coming from and where it's going if you want to be efficient. And everybody here could and should be more efficient at all times. There's always some optimization that we can look at. So step number one is probably the most tedious, but it really doesn't have to be super overwhelming. It's just compiling your sources. How many bank accounts do you have? Do you have the logins for all those? Just sit down at some point and just go through all your bank accounts. Just pull all your records out, slap them in a spreadsheet, just get the data, right? You can go through it. You can have AI help you with that. I can help you with that. There's some pretty easy shortcuts, but just getting a map of all your accounts, your bank accounts, your credit cards, stock retirement portfolios, any cash stashes you have outside of financial institutions. That's also important. Any kind of standing court orders, like I said earlier, you've got your child support, alimony, restitution, blah, blah, blah. Insurance accounts, do you have an HSA? Do you have life insurance? Are you collecting annuities? There's all kinds of ways that money can move to us and away from us, and just understanding which accounts are active and which ones kind of influence that number. You got to know about it. So just compile all your sources together. And most of these companies will send you emails. They send you paper statements. So instead of throwing them in the trash, just take a look at one. Put the name of that bank account on a list at some point, and then you can just go through each of your accounts. Not necessarily each transaction, but just knowing which accounts you have. Like, let's say you got 2 bank accounts, and a savings account in a third bank or something. Just write it down, okay? Then we're going to look at number accuracy. So this is where you want to get into the transactional stuff, and we're going to start with the recurring expenses too. And that's going to help you at least establish a cadence or a pace for all your money that's being spent, okay? Like, let's say you've got Netflix subscriptions, insurance payments, your mortgage. All these things are regularly scheduled payments, so there's no reason to be surprised by any of them, right? You got annual payments as well, so if you sign up for like a yearly subscription, that's going to be a little bit more of a surprise if you're not tracking that because you paid it maybe 6 months ago and forgot about it. So you don't want to be surprised, which is why it's important to just go back through the last year or so and just list out all the expenses that you think of or that you can identify that aren't things like, buying a candy bar at a gas station, okay? And then anything that goes towards the same service, you can just group those together. That way you have a clean map of where your money's going by category, and it'll make it a little bit easier to also identify duplicates. Like my wife and I had 2 separate Hulu accounts, just didn't pay attention. So we're paying twice for Hulu, but we only had 1 account connected to the TV, and I never look at it on my computer. So it's just little stuff like that where just having the visibility can help you pick up on those things. And speaking of picking up, once you've identified your recurring expenses, you can usually figure out which ones might be able to be discounted. Like your mortgage, not so much, because that'll include like a refinance, and it's not always the best idea. But there are things that are recurring that you can usually get reduced, like phone, internet, maybe not so much the electric, subscription services, things like that. You can always look for wiggle room. And a lot of times, the providers usually have customer loyalty programs, retention promos, or price matching or anything like that. It's always worth just picking up the phone and just saying the words, right? You can send them an email as well. You can open a chat if you're someone who doesn't like talking on the phone, but there is a distinct advantage in talking to someone on the phone in that they're a human, and humans are fallible. And sometimes those lead to mistakes which can benefit you. Okay, and we'll cover the phone call aspect of it in a little bit later, but just understand that if you can save, $50 a month just by picking up a phone for 10 minutes and talking to somebody, that's hundreds of dollars every year that you're just not spending needlessly. So it's worth at least picking up the phone, in my opinion. 10 minutes worth of a call for maybe $300 to $600 payoff. That's a pretty good hourly rate in terms of money that you get to keep. So I like it. And then we're going to determine the money flow map, and that's going to be where we take the numbers and the dates and we kind of marry them together so that we can track the inflow and the outflow, so that you don't have surprises, or the surprises that you do have you can manage well and you can take hits gracefully, and I'll talk about that specifically when we get to that part. But that's an important concept when it comes to being efficient, because we can't always avoid going in the negative sometimes. If maybe you don't have the best job and maybe something comes up in your life and you just have to, you have emergency expenses that you can't really offset, that happens too. But if you have to take a hit, we can be intelligent and deliberate about how we take it. And then we have to take all this stuff and put it together and make sure that we can actually execute. Give me one moment, guys. I'm sorry, I have a slight deviation here. All right, sorry about that, guys. I'm back again. Jeez, I was muted on my microphone, by the way, so I'm gonna have to probably cut that part out. Anyway, so you guys have an advantage of being here. Okay, so yeah, transportation, right? You gotta have that, especially unless you live in like downtown Manhattan or something like that. You're gonna need a car. You're gonna need a truck. You're gonna need something to get from A to B, not just for work, not just for groceries, but there's an attrition tax that comes from just ordering stuff online and paying those little service fees. You might do your grocery shopping once every week or once every other week. If you're paying even $10, that's an extra $300 to $500 a year that you don't have to spend. And a lot of times they just mess up your groceries anyways. So it's up to you. But that applies to one specific thing. If you're constantly doing that and you're constantly paying those service fees, delivery fees, things like that, because you don't want to pay for a car or you don't need a car, which it's not always appropriate to have a car. Sometimes people just don't need them. But if that's your choice and you're paying more, or you're paying some unnecessary number because you made that decision, being aware of that and then figuring out which path is appropriate is worth sitting down and thinking about. And that's what people just don't typically do. Plus, you can also, again, use that auto loan to help you build and maintain your credit, and you can pretty good deals on that once you figure out how to do it. Plus, you can refinance your auto loan and extend the term and increase that age of accounts as well. But we'll get into the credit stuff towards the end. But just understand that having these established lines of credit isn't evil. Your goal is just to get as big of a discount as you can, okay? Because remember, the name of the game is not paying more than you have to for pretty much everything. All right? And then when it comes to the smaller amounts, those are typically just your debt, loans, credit cards, things like that. Now, ideally, they're smaller, but sometimes things happen and you got to take bigger loans. But these are ones that are critical to pay, okay? All of these are critical, to some degree, but your housing and vehicle, you could take a hit. You could be late on that, blah, 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 blah. That's okay. They're going to yell at you. They're going to ding your credit score potentially. They might repossess your vehicle if you're late too many times or if the terms are super strict. But if you default on debt, loans, that's going to be really ugly in a lot of cases because that'll cascade. So we try to make sure we prioritize paying those, not just to keep your credit score up, but because you don't want like a judgment against you, because that can get really nasty really quickly. And, same, you don't want to lose your house because if you get a foreclosure, it just gets really messy. So to avoid that, we must prioritize our major recurring above all else. Aside from our food, we got to eat, take care of ourselves, but housing first, and then debt obligations, okay? Just like a company would. They have to pay off their debts first, and then they can try to grow their business, okay? Now we'll look at minor recurring history. This is, again, just things that aren't really huge, but we use them a lot, okay? Like your utilities, for example. Ideally your utility bills aren't too big, but they can, they add up, right? Especially if you got different types. You got electricity, you got gas, you got oil potentially, or if you got to buy, kerosene, if you've got an older setup there, your internet, your phone, just all the little stuff that we kind of have to have in 2026. And, if you're not tracking that stuff and if you're not, disputing things like if the meter is wrong for your electric bill or your water bill, for example, and you don't dispute it and your electric bill goes up, a couple $100 and you don't pay attention to it because it's auto paid, they got one over on you and that's it. It's their money now. So it's always worth just kind of being aware of what's going on and knowing your expected ranges for things. Groceries, typically a smaller budget than utilities combined, but sometimes not, right? So again, these might be a little bit more shuffled around a little bit, but meal management, for example, if you're meal prepping and you have a plan for the week and you can go out and get groceries and accomplish that in an efficient way, that'll save you from having to, Grubhub at 9:00 at night because you forgot, or because you don't feel like cooking, or because you don't have what you need in the household. And that cost, might go from maybe $20, $30 at the store up to maybe $70 or $80 on Grubhub. And that, again, you just doubled your expense unnecessarily. The advantage there is you get a tasty meal delivered to your door with no effort. But if you can avoid those, it's always best money-wise to do that. And you can always order on top of that, but it's always best to try to prepare stuff at home in terms of just controlling your household and your money. And I'll never forget, there was an episode of Cops. This guy got arrested and he had all kinds of money on him, and he was telling the cop, the cop was asking him where the money came from and blah, blah, blah. And he just looked at the camera. He's like, I don't eat out. Or something like that. He's like, I stopped ordering out. And, I think he was trying to get out of something, but it's true. I mean, the less money you spend on ordering and doing all that stuff, the more money you'll have in your pocket. And then you can allocate that towards, higher quality ingredients and, other activities. And that's where you get into the wealth aspect, the money that you get to keep. Okay. So if you're someone that you sit down and you look at all your bank accounts, your credit card statements, and all you see is DoorDash, that's worth considering, right? Just look into it. Doesn't mean you have to make a change, but step one is just becoming aware of it. So that's always worth identifying, right? And then you got your streaming services and subscriptions, especially if you're on the stock market side. You guys are probably going to have a bunch of little like $7 to $10 subscriptions. Sometimes they're $3. If you do ebooks or anything like that, you're probably going to have a bunch of those. If you watch a lot of shows, Paramount, Netflix, Hulu, what's the other one there? Disney Plus, there's Amazon Prime. There's all kinds of little subscriptions, and they're priced low on purpose so that they're not uncomfortable for us to go through the effort to cancel. If we see a little $5 or $10 transaction coming through once a month, we're like, it doesn't matter. I don't really care. It's not worth going through the effort of canceling. And sometimes the cancellation processes are a little bit challenging, just to make sure that people who aren't really committed to canceling don't finish, right? Because companies want to make money. So, being aware of what streaming services and subscriptions you have can help you tremendously, because in a lot of cases, this is a good way to unlock maybe hundreds of dollars a month just from things that you forgot to cancel. If you do, pretty much anything, if it's recurring, you need to have visibility of it. Okay. And then the stealth expenses are kind of in that same vein, in that they quietly accumulate. So if you're paying, let's say you go to an ATM a lot because you want to pay cash for something, instead of going to one specific ATM and paying maybe a $3 fee, go to your bank. Just withdraw it there for free. It might not seem like a lot, but that $3, if you do it 70 times, that's $210 you didn't have to spend. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but the main point here is that it's unnecessary, right? So if you just walk past $200 sitting on the ground, would you pick it up? Is it worth that little bit of extra effort? I would say so. Now, if you have to drive, 10 miles to go to your bank, then maybe it makes more sense to take the fee. So it's up to you, but it's those little recurring expenses that just we don't care about, like the Webull data subscription. It's like $2 a month or something. It's not much, but it adds up, and that's how they get you. So the better you are at identifying those stealth expenses and your streaming services and subscriptions and your grocery, inefficiencies and your utilities, and just being on top of those without being a psycho about it, because you don't want to be the person who's like pulling 2-ply toilet paper apart to get twice as many rolls. But the better you are about staying on top of that and being aware, the more efficiency you'll be early on. The more efficiency you'll have early on. And once you see it start to compound and you see that snowball effect, it kind of becomes like a little game. So it's worth just mapping stuff out. Okay. So now we're going to look at individual outflow management, and this is kind of how we make sure that the things that we're paying for are worth it. Okay. So after we've looked at all our bank accounts, our credit card accounts, all of our stuff, all our inflow and outflow, we're just going to look at the outflow, and that's just what we're spending. Okay. We're going to look at each one at a time, and we're going to do three things. First, we're going to consider necessity. If it's something you haven't used in 6 months and you just keep paying for it, that can usually just be cut right there, and you can just free up that money, right? If it's something that maybe you kind of use, kind of don't, kind of use, kind of don't, and you don't want to really sign up for it again and then cancel it and then sign up for it again, consider the pacing of how often you would be doing that and whether or not it's worth it. Because in a lot of cases, we can always reduce that expense. Instead of canceling it or getting rid of it completely, we can just reduce the expense if possible. Okay. If you're a business owner, for example, this is going to be huge, right? This is an outflow. So if you're paying for, meat as an example, you don't want to go with the cheapest bidder, obviously, but you can, enough not to overpay. right? Yeah, and you can pause subscriptions too. That's a great point, Nikki. Just to kind of ease the financial burden right now, right? What matters right now is what you have. And if you don't have it, then it's not going to matter until it does. And usually that's not good. All right, Anurad, I appreciate it. Hopefully you remember the stuff that was on the part where I muted. I'll probably circle back to that part. But I'm glad you're able to hang out with us, and we'll pick up on it next time. Appreciate you. So once you consider whether or not something is necessary, and for this, I'm not talking about, again, protein in your diet. You need that. So don't skip on that stuff. But once you figure out that it's necessary, then you can move on to the due diligence part. And this is where you might have to pick up a phone call and talk to a supervisor, not to be a jerk, but just calling, reading through the terms and conditions of maybe your credit card statement to see if there's a way to get a competitive rate on that APR, or maybe they can switch you over to another plan, or price matching altogether. Let's say that you're over here on this phone plan and you want to go over there and you don't want to lose them as a service provider, but you can get a better deal elsewhere, and you want to connect those dots. A lot of companies offer price matching because they still want your business. Okay, so we'll get into all the different strategies there in a little bit. Once you figure out, whatever you want to accomplish with that specific outflow, then you take action. And the idea here is that you don't procrastinate, because that is the number one killer of financial efficiency. Is people say, "Oh, I'll do it next week. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it when customer service is open." Call. Just call. It's just important to get on the phone and call. Put it on your calendar if you're going to put it off. Write yourself a note. Make sure that you do it, though. Don't just keep putting it off, because every time you put it off and you pay again at full price, which is above value in most cases, you're paying that extra markup for no reason. Or if it's a service that you just don't use and you meant to cancel it and you forgot, you just lost money for no reason other than you just procrastinated, right? And again, it's not a character flaw. We're all very busy and we have a lot of stuff to do, but if we can control something, we owe it to ourselves and to our future to cancel it, to control it. Sorry. In that case, it would be canceling. Sonic is a necessity. There you go. Curly fries. Delta has big. Yeah. You guys talk about makeup. I don't have that, unfortunately. I don't need to buy makeup. I mean, I should, but I don't. All right. So now we can look at some of the strategies related to recurring expenses reduction. So anytime you find out that you want to get something for cheaper, there's typically 5 different avenues you can go down. 6 if you want to be chaos. But first one obviously is the easiest one. I'm going to start right here. Just ask. Okay. A lot of times it could be just as simple as that, because the person on the other end of the phone is probably dealing with a bunch of complaining jerks and just wants to be treated like a human. So you just pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I'm in this situation. You're a human. I'm a human. I'm not trying to make your job harder. Is there anything you can do to help me out this month? And then can I get that locked in going forward?" Right? Or you call back and talk to another person and be like, "Hey, this is what I paid last month. Can I get this rate locked in? Because I don't want to leave." Right? So just call, and I'll walk you through a specific strategy for that. But just calling them and talking to another human. That's always the simplest strategy, and it's usually the most effective. The next one is going to be loyalty programs. So we're kind of jumping around a little bit here. I probably should have put these in order. Next one's going to be loyalty programs. So when a company acquires you, okay, meaning that they've paid some money for their marketing budget, and they expect to collect data for X number of customers, each of those customers has an LTV, or lifetime value, based on what their average customer spends in total over time. Okay? So once you, as a customer, exceed your LTV, your lifetime value, the money the company gets from you is just extra profit in the way that they file their papers, their numbers. So they don't really need to prioritize squeezing every cent out of you, because you're just kind of icing on the cake at that point. So a lot of times they'll offer loyalty programs for people that are members for X number of months or X number of years, and they sometimes get reduced rates. So it's worth asking about, especially if it's something you've had for a couple of years, like your phone, for example. I don't like Verizon anymore, So, but I got a pretty good rate right now, but I want to see if I can get a better rate. So I'm going to call them up and see what they can do. Because I know for a fact I've exceeded my lifetime value for Verizon. Okay? And then kind of in that same vein is retention promos. So customers don't want to lose you. They have your data, but they want your monthly payment, even if it's not in the full amount. And in order to do that, they have to keep you as a customer, and sometimes that means making a little compromise. And if you can take advantage of these, it kind of benefits both parties. So it makes sense to at least ask for retention promos. Sometimes you can just find them on like coupon sites. They might offer like they might tell you like, hey, Verizon's offering this, or Spectrum Internet's offering that, or Comcast is offering this right now for this month, and blah, 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 because maybe that company wants to just bolster their numbers before their next financial earnings report. So they really ramp up these promos behind the scenes, but you have to know about them in order to participate. And if you don't ask, you're never going to know. So again, it all boils down to the same thing. Just ask. No matter what avenue you go down, just taking the action and asking kind of helps. The closed mouth doesn't get fed in this sense. And then if you want to take a little bit more of an adversarial approach, okay, you can incorporate price matching, and you could say, hey, Verizon, AT&T over here is willing to offer me, $50 cheaper, and I get to bring my own phone. They're going to give me unlimited data and blah, 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 blah. But I want to stay with you guys because I've been here for a long time. I like this. I want to keep my number. I want to keep my, my phone and all that. I'm just trying to save some money. The economy is a little bit tight right now, and I really like Verizon, but I don't want to go over there. But I kind of have to at some point, unless you guys can help me out and match what they're offering. And it's a competitor, so in a lot of cases they will, because they don't want that competitor to get you as a customer, because then they get your data and they get your recurring monthly payment, and that hits them in two fronts, right? So seeing what the competitors are offering, especially when it comes to things like credit cards, can help you tremendously in locking in affordable and beneficial rates. Even if you've been there for a long time, okay, you can always just shop around, see if you can find a better deal, and just kind of weasel your way down as low as you can. You'll have a good time. And then the last kind of ethical approach here is going to be to call and ask specific questions. If you're going down your bill line by line, and you call prepared with specific numbers for these conversations, it'll probably go a little bit better in your favor. If you know about one of their kind of behind the scenes promos, for example, and maybe you don't get the answer the first time, maybe you get the answer the second time when you call because you talk to a different person or you talk to a supervisor, but you've already got information that they probably don't expect you to have. You're going to have a much better time when it's, time to actually interface with that person, because you're going to be speaking the same language. And a good example here is if you are asking about a military discount, understanding that you probably are going to need your DD-214, which is your discharge form, or not your discharge form, it's your record, or your DOD ID, just in case they ask for it. You want to have it ready on the spot so that there's less friction between them considering giving you a discount and them locking it in, because locking it in is the most important part. Otherwise, none of that stuff matters. All right. So these are kind of 5 approaches you can take. They're all kind of in the same vein, though. The one thing you don't want to do is rely on intimidation or threats, okay? And again, these are people on the other end of the phone. A lot of them deal with, a lot of hostility, a lot of toxicity all day. I worked in a call center myself, so I know how it is. They might be having a bad day, and they might want to escalate things, and you don't want to sacrifice a service or potentially risk legal action, if someone else kind of overreacts, if that's how you view it. Okay. Yeah. Save it for the insurance people. So you typically want to avoid hostile interactions. You're going to get a lot more progress by treating someone like a human rather than an obstacle. Okay. So work with them. And a lot of times they'll work with you. If someone does cross the line, if there's a wrongdoing, or somebody else made a threat, or a customer said something super inappropriate, that's not the time to push for a discount or compensation or or anything like that. You're better off just filing the grievance wherever it's appropriate, report them to bureaus if that's appropriate, and then you can call back later. But if you start mentioning it and trying to strong-arm them because you were wronged as a customer, you got to be careful how far you push that, because a company won't want to take on that liability of a customer that is actively calling them out, so they might just cut you off immediately. And they can even hit you with a cease and desist if they believe that the claims you're making are too specific. So it's not worth risking a service or potentially a bigger expense just because you were wronged and you want to kind of capitalize on it. So you don't want to take the angry Karen route too much. There is a time and a place for it, but not when it comes to when things escalate too far. Okay. All right, so here's kind of where we get into the tactical approach to getting those reductions locked in. Okay, So the first one is just calling the right person, making sure that you're calling the right department, the right business, the right line, if you will, and that the right person is picking up the phone. You're going to save yourself some time, but more importantly, you're going to save someone else a little bit of headache. And if that other person ends up happening to be along the chain of people that you have to talk to eventually, if you are someone they don't remember as being difficult, you're going to have a better time. If you're someone that called them and said, hey, you run through your whole spiel, and then they're like, oh, that's not my department, bye. They're going to remember that because it's a little bit sticky and a little bit annoying because you kind of wasted their time. So rather than doing all that, just do your little research, do a little bit more research, and then just, make sure you're calling the right place. Measure twice, cut once. It's not worth just Googling, it's not against the rules to just Google something twice. Just make sure you get the right information. And then when it's time to talk to the person, start off with a concern, a pain point, or some sort of stress that you have to relate to them as a human, because everybody on the planet is stressed. And I'm not saying you have to be manipulative here. Just open the conversation saying, hey, I really like being with you guys, but it's difficult right now, right? It's just like being in a relationship. You have to say, I really like being in this relationship, but there are some things that are making it difficult, right? It doesn't have to be about blame. It doesn't have to be about, anything other than the numbers. You can just say, hey, the economy's tightening up. Everybody can relate to that. You can say, I want to keep my service. I don't want to have it disrupted. You get your money, but right now I need a little bit of short-term help, right? I want a little bit of alleviation here. And then say, I know you guys want to keep me as a customer as well. Is there anything that we can do together that's mutually beneficial? And a lot of times they're just going to know what promos they have laying around because they're going to deal with this stuff all day. But you're going to be the nice customer that actually wants to stay and isn't threatening to take your business elsewhere. So you're the oasis in the desert for them in most cases. As long as you're calling for purpose and that you treat them like a human, you'll probably have a good time. And it's going to be an especially good time if you already have a solution in mind and you say, hey, can I connect this problem with this solution? And if you can mention a specific solution, that makes it a lot easier for them. And then it's just a simple yes or no for them. And then instead of just kind of figuring out whether or not it can apply to you, they're already going to know the answer. Then it's just a matter of how do we fill that gap and actually do it. And if you've looked at their promo sites, if you looked at anything that they have out there to try to get new customers and you want to participate, you say, hey, I know this is only for new customers, but I'm wondering if you can make an exception. And I see this rate and this is what I would like to get locked in. A lot of times they'll just be like, yeah, why not? Let's just throw you in there. And then the most important part is locking it in, right? Because none of this matters unless they lock it in. If you call Verizon and say, hey, can you move my payment date, to after the 1st because I need to manage my money, so on and so forth. And let's say your billing date is on like the 20th. And they say, yeah, sure. And you're just on the phone and they don't actually change it. You can get hit on the 20th. And then guess what? You planned on that money being spent somewhere else. You take an insufficient fees hit and maybe you got 10 more days before your paycheck lands as an example, right? So getting it in writing is always critical. Save yourself a screenshot. Have them send you an email while you're on the phone. You're going to get the best results on the phone, but you have to get it locked in and try not to hang up until you can, or at least get some sort of reference number so that, if you have to dispute it, you can. Because what's going to happen is if you do have to take a financial hit and you get like fees from your bank and stuff, they're not responsible for those. Even if they say that they're going to help you out and they're not going to charge you, and then they do charge you, that's still between you and your bank. The company's not going to pay your late fees and stuff like that. So you got to be mindful of that. Okay. You're the only one that's responsible for making sure that your money is yours. All right. So when it comes to inflow versus outflow, money is a storage instrument at the end of the day. It is a capacitor. It just holds a charge basically. And that charge is a value for usually labor or some sort of good, right? You're just trading its value, and its value increases or decreases depending on what you're trying to get and what they're willing to accept. Sorry. So it's important to track your income, right? And again, just fully track it. It doesn't matter if it's, like $20. If it's inflow, it's inflow. If you have like an affiliate payout that you get on a monthly basis, just track it, because that little bit might help, right? It's $20 you didn't have to spend on something else. That's your Netflix subscription right there. You get Netflix for free because you have this affiliate thing and they happen to line up on your schedule, right? So once you've tracked your income, you want to improve it in any way that you possibly can without, again, sacrificing your quality of life. So a couple good ideas, if it's possible, donating plasma. It's a great thing to do. It helps a lot of people and you get paid a lot of money for it potentially. I'm talking hundreds, maybe 1,000 plus a month just for sitting in a chair for, an hour every week, maybe twice a week, depending on where you go. It's a great secondary source of income. I kind of always pitch that as a go-to because most people have blood. And another one, if you can type and you don't mind going through some, initial hurdles, you could do transcription jobs. You can, even if you just want to put yourself on Fiverr as someone who's just willing to provide captions, for example, for audio or video, you can do that as well. It's something you could do at home and you can typically get paid quite a bit of little extra cash for it. Doesn't take a whole lot as long as you can type. You can proofread. You can do all kinds of side jobs. Okay, the internet is unlimited in terms of what you can accomplish. And then for outflow, right? You want to track this obviously as well, but you want to be adaptive in how you do it, and that's where you're going to be able to break that cycle of survive to thrive. So. I mentioned it right here. Money belongs to whoever asks for it first until you change that. You have to make the decision and then you have to take the steps to change it. So if you are constantly going paycheck to paycheck to paycheck to paycheck and you don't see any extra money in your bank account, that's because you're not optimized. It doesn't mean that you don't make enough. It doesn't mean that you're spending too much. It just means that you're not optimized. And in a lot of cases, that can be as simple and I don't mean this to sound toxic positive in any way because I know people are legitimately struggling right now. But there's almost always a way to offset at least the dates that these inflow and outflow occur so that you can increase your money flow in between and that those dollars can be used more efficiently over time because you'll have access to liquidity. And that is what makes the difference. It's not just making more money because I know people that make a ton of money and they're always broke. I'm pretty sure we all do. Another story here. I moved to Oklahoma. I lived with my older brother for a little while. We both worked at Cisco as a food distributor. I worked in the fleet maintenance shop, and he was one of the mechanics. I started off at $12.50 an hour, which was pretty good, especially at that time. It was pre, 9/11. It was 2002. It was just after 9/11, around there. It was a pretty good rate for someone my age. Just kind of, they didn't have a cap on overtime, so I was making a ton of money, right? I was making $18.75 an hour in overtime, and I was working like 75 to 80 hours a week. I was delirious, but it was awesome. And then my brother was making like $22.75 or something like that base, right? So his overtime was $30-some-odd. He was always asking me for money. I was like, "Where's your money going?" So he was making plenty of money, but he was just so irresponsible with it. And then to kind of supplement that, he wanted some of mine because we lived together. And I was like, "That's, you're my brother, but that ain't how it works." And then I pointed, he had like a $200 pair of sunglasses on his head. It's like, "Buddy, we can fix this." So we sat down, we looked at his expenses, and we kind of figured out, where the biggest holes were. And it wasn't the little discretionary stuff. Like, I hate the fact that people say, don't buy Starbucks. Like, you shouldn't sacrifice the little comforts because, your mental health needs that too. And more importantly than that, it's not going to make a dent. It's the big recurring expenses. That's where you have to focus. Your high interest credit cards, your high interest debt. Those are the things that's going to hurt you long term. It's not a cup of coffee every day. It's not, buying a pair of shoes once in a while. Like, that's just something that's told to younger generations to destroy their self-esteem and to shift accountability. Okay, so you don't have to stop buying Starbucks. There's no bootstrap approach to this. You just have to focus on the numbers, and the common sense approach is to knock down the biggest ones as much as you can, and not just try to chip away at it by taking the little $3 expenses out of the mix. That helps, but that's not going to be the solution. So you have to change your financial cadence if you want to see that cycle of survival get broken, and that's what I want to see for you guys. And a lot of times, like I said right here, just working with the companies, they want to keep you. They don't want you to default. They don't want to have to collect. They don't want to have to send extra correspondence to you to try to get you to pay your stuff. It's all about the outflow cadence, And a lot of times a company might just be okay deferring a payment to the end of your term, for example, or they might just say, we'll put you on a payment plan for this specific month's payment. We'll just add maybe a little piece of it to your future payments till it's paid off. That's great, but that can also snowball. Sorry. So you have to work with your companies that you're paying money to, and then also understand the terms that you're entering so that they're not predatory and they don't accidentally, put you in a worse position. And that's why I see a lot of people try to get out of debt and they take on, higher interest credit cards to try to consolidate because those offer a bigger limit. And that's a big no-no because you're taking that same amount of money and instead of maybe 12% interest, you're now paying 28% interest. So the principal didn't change at all. You just changed your APR and you made it higher. So you're losing money for the sake of simplicity, right? So just little things like that we got to be mindful of. But working with the companies is always important. All right, so let's look at some possible inflow sources. Money can come in from any number of sources. Your financial picture will be different, but they generally fall into maybe 4 topics, right? First one, and usually the biggest one, is just going to be your labor. If you get paid hourly, if you work for a salary, whatever it is, this tends to be the most consistent and the largest for most people because it's regular income. You commit, 40 hours a week to it plus, a third of your day gets, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 7 days a week for some people. Some days it's more, or, maybe it's 12 hours a day. Maybe it's 16 hours a day. Maybe you're someone who works multiple jobs. This is usually going to be your biggest source of income. So it's important to be able to show up and to be able to be efficient while you're there. And then also that, all the time and energy that you're committing to this job isn't just being wasted because you didn't cancel something that you could have canceled, So it's important that you value your time because, again, money is a storage instrument. So if you're going out there and committing all this time and spending your time on this planet working for someone, and then you're throwing that money away because of any small reason, it's going to be counterproductive. So always focus here. Your biggest numbers are going to be the ones that you should focus on the most. All right, Nikki, thanks for hanging out. Appreciate you. This is recorded. I'll upload it. We just got that dead space in there for a little bit. So kind of bear with me on that when I upload it. But I'm glad you were able to hang out, and I hope you enjoyed your Texans game. Number 2 is going to be side hustles, partnerships, anything that you have that's less than your hourly wages. This could be a side job. It could be maybe you do like Lyft or Uber. Maybe you do Instacart, DoorDash, one of those services. Maybe you're a reseller. Maybe you own vending machines and you collect the money. Maybe you have a laundromat. Anything that you do. Maybe you wash cars or mow lawns or do anything like that just for a little extra money. Or maybe you collect money from a business venture that you and a friend went in on or a relative. That counts as extra money through partnership or a side hustle. So they can be very, very lucrative if you do them right, and they can scale if they're structured correctly. But not everyone's going to have that. So just worth considering. But if you do have a side hustle, that is a legitimate form of income, and it's worth tracking. Okay. The next one here, not going to apply to everybody, but again, this course and these streams are for anybody who might be, maybe you've made your millions in the market and you're just trying to be more efficient. Maybe you're a business owner. Maybe you're just had a household. Maybe you're a bachelor, that just wants to get a little bit more disciplined with your money, or maybe you're someone who's just getting out of prison after 10 years and you just didn't have anyone to teach you financial literacy skills and you don't really understand how money works. That's what this is here for. So sometimes that involves court orders. If you receive child support, or if you are collecting alimony or spousal maintenance, those are all forms of secondary income. Not everyone's going to have this, obviously, but if you do, it's worth tracking. It's worth writing down, especially things like spousal maintenance, for example. Those are typically limited terms, so you're not going to get that indefinitely, and usually a lot shorter term than something like child support, which tends to go on for years till the children are, a certain age. So it's worth writing down, worth understanding exactly when those will end, because you have to know, when that's going to stop. And it's also important to keep track of the schedule for when you can consider refactoring those. Like child support, for example, you can get those increased or decreased over time, depending on the needs of the child, your income, the other parent. So it's worth keeping an eye on, right? And then the last one here is going to be stock investments, things like retirement accounts. If you are able to earn money in the market reliably, great. I love it. I'm right there with you guys, but not everyone's going to have this as well. And a lot of people are going to kind of turn this into an outflow. so just be considerate of yourself when it comes to putting money in the stock market and getting money out of the stock market, and other forms too. It's not just stock markets. You could do like personal loans and arbitrage and things like that. But for right now, your possible inflow sources are usually going to be the top two here. It's either going to be labor, wages, and salary, or it's going to be a side hustle or some sort of partnership. And then these two kind of just are there, but they don't really apply to everybody. Now, we got to consider the money outflow, because just like it comes in, it goes out. And the money going out is what puts people into survival mode. So again, we're going to start with the biggest one. It's going to be household expenses in most cases. This is where you got your mortgage, your utilities, your interests, your insurance, your vehicle, groceries, recurring expenses, stealth expenses, savings accounts, HSAs, all that stuff. That all applies here because they're recurring and they're large in most cases. They're impactful to your life. Okay. Then you've got hobby costs. Maybe you take up Taekwondo, or maybe you belong to some club, or maybe you get magazines or something. Maybe you're, paying for music editing software or something like that. That's more of a hobby. You could live without it, but it brings you enrichment and it brings you value. So it's okay to pay for that. It's okay to have hobbies. It's healthy to have hobbies. But these are going to vary from person to person and hobby to hobby, right? Not everyone's going to take Taekwondo and have to pay for belts or monthly classes, fees, or anything like that. Likewise, we have court orders again, right? Because someone receives child support, someone else must pay, right? So, the court's not just going to give people money to raise their kids. So it's worth noting whatever obligations you have when it comes to court orders. If you owe a debt and you're in collections and they're garnishing your wages, it's important to know the terms of that garnishment so that you don't get surprised. And it's also important to know things like child support and things in that vein, because those can change, right? They're not fixed number once that next order comes in. If someone files a motion to modify that, then that number is going to change, and then that'll disrupt your budget. And then stock investment. 90% of traders will fail within their first year. So just as it counts as an inflow, it most typically counts as an outflow. So if you can make money, great. Make sure you pay yourself. Make sure you pay the IRS, not financial advice. But most of the time, people are going to just treat this like a money pit. They're going to try to make their money, and if they go too fast, too far, they're going to burn themselves up. This will be a loss. You can use it at tax time. That's great. But as far as money flow from day to day, that money's going to be tied up effectively. So be careful until you know what you're doing. With all these, you don't want to overcommit to a hobby either, because those can get pretty expensive, and you definitely don't want to overcommit in court, because that can be pretty messy with legal fees and all kinds of stuff added on top. No bueno. So we're nearing the end of this, and I want to talk about the big three. So as far as financial focus, I think that we can kind of boil it down into three elements that will improve almost anybody's finances, and they're things that you can focus on starting today. Okay. Once you prioritize these three things, your financial efficiency should increase, and this is where you can separate income from wealth, because again, wealth is what's left. So you need to have something left if you want to build and break out of that survival mode. So your first one, is going to be your high interest costs. So every dollar you spend towards interest is a dollar less towards the principal. So if you have $200 and you pay $150 towards the principal and then $50 towards interest, because you had to, your payment was $200, that extra $50 doesn't go towards the principal. It goes towards interest, which you're just kind of throwing away just for the advantage of having that credit line. Right? So we want to get a discount on that $50, because that extra money, let's say we were able to save 20 of that, then we could put $170 towards the principal, and then maybe we only pay 30 in interest, because we were able to get that $20 reduction in the interest rate, right? So those interest dollars will cascade. It's like compounding growth. It's really, really cool once you see it in action, but you have to ask. You have to shop around. You have to do a little due diligence. But more importantly, before you can do any of that, give me 1 second, guys. I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. I love it. All right. So those dollars cascade and they compound pretty nicely because, again, it's all about money flow. Okay. And then the number 2 for the big 3 is going to be your recurring reductions. Again, there's just no reason to pay more for the same services. Okay. I would absolutely support a local business and I would pay them more than necessary, if the situation warranted it, but I'm not going to pay a giant corporation more just for the fun of it. Like, they don't consider my feelings. I'm not going to consider theirs. They'll survive. They make so much extra money for padding. They don't need my money. Local business, yeah. If it's a lemonade stand, absolutely. I'll give them a little extra just because I admire the enthusiasm and the hustle. But giant corporation, the IRS, no, I'm not paying them any more than I have to, ever. So the more you can reduce, the more extra flow you'll have in your money, and that combines nicely with those interest reductions, okay? And then the last one here is going to be your credit score, and this is kind of it's a more abstract expense. But again, the better your credit score, the more opportunities you're going to have, the more access to liquidity you're going to have, and the lower you're going to pay in poor tax, okay? So if you have a credit score of like 500 and someone else has a credit score of like 800, that person will automatically pay less over the course of their just regular expenses than the person with the 500 credit score. I don't know, I can't talk today. So it's the hidden stuff. So don't discount the importance of a credit score, and also don't believe that you need to spend a bunch of money to build it, because you don't really need all that. We'll talk about that in the future. But you will definitely want to pay attention to your credit score. So with that said, I've reached the end of this presentation, but I want to go a little bit farther here. I kind of want to build out a, not necessarily a budget, but I want to kind of talk about a roadmap that we can follow. Yeah, that was weird. I couldn't close my thingy. So that we can kind of understand the goal that we're trying to accomplish today. Okay? So first we're going to map the inflow. Then we're going to map the outflow, right? Just knowing where the money's going and where it's coming from is important. And then we can focus on the cadence, okay? And the cadence just is the pace at which things are moving, okay? It's a tempo. So again, if you've got all your expenses are front-loaded and you pay them all in the first, week of the month, for example, because you've lined up all your payment dates, and it's right after payday and all that good stuff, and all the money settles and everything goes great, you're going to know exactly what's left right after that, and you're probably going to have a better time. So moving your due dates is a double-edged sword, but in most cases it's pretty good, because then it keeps things simple, it keeps things clean. Now, if you have all your due dates kind of front-loaded and say something messes up with payroll and you don't get paid on time, then all your bills will hit and you could potentially go negative and incur bank fees. So again, double-edged sword, but understanding that, you've got a certain number of obligations each month or year, if they're yearly expenses, and being able to control and pace them gives you a huge advantage that most people just don't have. So it's worth exploring. It's worth building up a little bit of padding as much as you can to kind of offset those weird situations. And more importantly, you want to stay out of the hole, because once you go in the hole and you start paying insufficient fee balances, it's harder and harder to climb out, because then you're paying twice as much for just not having money. So it's not fun. And once you get all your inflows and all your outflows, then you can consider necessity, right? And again, I'm not talking about, should I buy eggs because you want to be healthy. Like, you got to be healthy in order to go to work and make money. And you got to be healthy, to have a healthy mindset. And if you're forcing yourself to sit in the dark because you didn't want to pay your electric bill or couldn't figure out how to get around that, that's okay. We can work on that. But I don't want anyone here sitting in the dark, taking cold showers, eating ramen, and using single-ply toilet paper just because they don't track all their money and they just keep getting hit with stuff. And that's the alternative. That's kind of for people that don't map out their budgets and don't focus on financial efficiency and things like that. So we can change that for ourselves. And the last step is just reducing the recurring. Any chance you get to pay less, seize it. I can't give you guys financial advice, but I can tell you that it makes no sense to pay, again, these big companies, the IRS, all that stuff. It makes no sense to pay them extra. Okay? You're not going to get extra. They don't care about you. Okay? You have to care about yourself. So with that said, Let me open this up to some Q&A here, and then I'm just going to kind of make a quick sample budget. And then I'll kind of show you guys kind of how I do it. I'll just open one of these up. Just open up a little tab here. Just going to go to Google Sheets. Probably have to sign in here. Let me use that one. I'm on a different profile here, so it's going to make me log in and do all that stuff. So hopefully it doesn't take too much. No, not doing that. Dine and Dash, boom, save 50 bucks. There you go. All right, why does it make me do all this? All right, so I'm going to start a brand new spreadsheet here. Okay, first thing I want to do is the dates. Okay, I'm going to close this tables as well. And the cool part about Google Spreadsheet, let me make this a little bit bigger so we can all see it, is that you can use formulas and it'll detect patterns and all that good stuff for us. So if I want to say, you know, here's my January 2026, I'm going to do the 1st and the 2nd, and then I'll do the 3rd as well. Okay, and then I'm just going to highlight these, and then I'm just going to, I'll zoom out a little bit so we can kind of see the effect here. But if I just click this little blue dot and drag it down, and I can teach you guys how to do all that as well. But I can just drag this down here and it will automatically do this for me. It'll fill in the dates. I can copy and paste it. I can type it manually, but just being able to do that very quickly in a spreadsheet, it can help tremendously. And then what you can do is you can look at the calendar and you can color code each of these cells for like the weekends and stuff. I don't like doing that personally. I like to use a formula. So this is maybe something I can help you with, or we can use ChatGPT for. I'm not going to get into all the specifics here, but I typically like to have a day of the week column as well. And then you can use conditional formatting to kind of darken the weekends and stuff like that. So for a budget, we're going to have expenses on the weekends. So this type of spreadsheet, I'm just going to leave it all open. Now, the next step here, I'm just going to zoom out again. Once I've got my date sorted, then I'm going to go over here and say, what are my major recurring expenses? What are my minor recurring? And then how much are they, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a little column between cost and cost. Okay, so my major recurring might be my mortgage, you know, my auto loan, insurance, and then I don't have anything else. So my minor recurring is going to be things like my utilities. Then I might have my phone, internet. By utilities, I mean like electric specifically. Phone, internet. Let's see what else. Netflix, right? I like Netflix. Maybe Hulu. You know, just stuff like that. Just like I have Dash Pass, for example. Little things like my gym membership. You know, just little dumb stuff. Then I'm just going to go through here. My mortgage is $20.73.71 a month. I got a pretty good one. It's $458.71, and then I think I got like $850 or something like that. And then for electric, it's usually around like $380. My phone is $27.99. Internet's a flat 90 with Spectrum. Netflix maybe 19. Hulu, I don't remember what these are. Dash Pass is like $10. Planet Fatness is $20. All right, so I've got my expenses kind of listed out here. Right, it doesn't matter what the specifics are. You're going to find all that in your bank statements. But the idea here is I'm just trying to demonstrate that we want to have some specifics in the mix, and then we can figure out kind of when they're due. Right. So my mortgage, for example, that's always going to be due on the 1st. So I can take this cell here, and again, I'll build the spreadsheet for you guys, and I'll include that in the budget builders. But this cell right here is L2. So I can say equals L2. Whoops. Equals L2. That always comes out on the 1st. It's something that's recurring. I know exactly when it comes out. My auto comes out on the 21st. So I can say, all right, L3. And I know the insurance comes out on the 5th. So I can mark that. Equals L4. And I'm putting a $sign in front of each of these so that if I drag and drop stuff, it doesn't move. All right. So I'm basically just going to do that for all these. And then I can figure out, you know, my total. And then this is just going to be a sum of L2 and L8. And then my total for this is going to be a sum of N2, N8. Oops, I forgot the equal sign. I'm not a software developer, guys. So I've got these totals here of all my outflows, and I can just combine these. Total outflow equals L, what is that, 9 plus N9. And it doesn't have to be this complicated. Man, I'm a dummy. Equals L9 plus N9. Okay, so these would effectively be my total outflows, okay? So this is kind of the calendar here, and then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to outflow here. I'm going to add a column here to the left, and then I'm going to add another column here to the left. So let's say this is bank account number 1. This is bank account number 2. Okay? And this is just the number that I would, let's say that I'm going to track my deposits here, right? So I'll do like that, 55, 34, 17, and let's say we got like 450 here, and then we get another one a couple weeks later, right? Just for demonstration purposes, okay? Now my bank balance, okay, let's say that we're starting with like, I don't know, 8540 or something. I would just accumulate all these. It's like a ledger, right? So it's going to be this number, so E1. And again, I can walk through how to do all these, just kind of demonstrating the advantage in just having these numbers in front of you. And right now I'm going to build a column here which will track my balance over the course of, you know, X, Y, and Z days of the month, okay? And then I'm going to show you what the next step is, and that's going to be to scale it month to month. So I've got this 8540 bill balance, going into January 1st, and then so I'm going to say that's that number plus B2 plus C2, right? I'm just tracking the deposits, minus D2 is that number, okay? And then okay, so once I've got that, basically I'm just going to click and drag this all the way down just like I did before, and that's going to track my balance. And let me just make all these numbers of dollars, sorry. And this will tell me kind of where my numbers are going to land. So if I change this to, let's say I've got $100 in the account, or $0, right? We'll walk through $0 first. So on this day, right, if I start with a brand new bank account, no dollars deposited for some reason, let's say they did that, I would have a total deposit of these two numbers combined, and then one debit, so a subtraction of this number, and that results in $39.1046. And then a little while later, 5 days later, 4 days later, we get another $850 deduction in terms of outflow, so we're spending money. That brings that number down to $30.60. And then we get a deposit in bank account number 2 on the 14th of $450, which brings the number up to $35.10. Right, so I've got this liquidity here. I've got money flow. Whereas if I took this down to, let's say, $2,000, just for fun, let's say that our salary was different. Let's say we started with $0 and we're making $2,000 on the first of the month, and then we get this $450. We get a couple of those a month, and this one happens to be on the first of the month. Our first major outflow would bring that down, and we'd only have $376 left. And then, of course, this doesn't factor in things like groceries and gas in the car and things like that. So we really want to get this number up to a reasonable amount, or this number down to a reasonable amount, so that there's a good balance there. Because what's going to happen is on the 5th, we're going to hit this $850 payout, and we're going to have to owe money, and we're going to go negative, and then we're going to take an insufficient funds fee. Okay? Whereas, on the 14th, we get this $450 deposit, which is kind of cool, but it's it's too little too late, right? So in this case, maybe it's worth deferring this $850 if possible, or reducing it so that we can survive a little bit longer. So let's say we get this, moved down here. It was $850, right? We're still going to go negative, but we've got so many extra days to try to find a solution before we have to deal with that. So it's not to say we're getting out of it, we're just moving it to a later date so that maybe we can go donate some plasma, or maybe we can sell something, or maybe we can pick up extra shifts or get a second job, or there's any number of things that we can do here to try to increase this number. But if everything's coming out right at once and it's a big number and we just keep getting hit and hit and hit and hit, that's going to put us behind for all these days. Every single day beyond that and the rest of the month, we're going to be negative. So if I'm going to go negative, I'm at least going to try to put it off as long as I can. And that's going to involve maybe calling that company and saying, hey, can you put this off till, the 21st or the 28th or something like that? And then you at least give yourself some runway so that you can figure out some sort of solution in between. Does that make sense to everybody? So if you're going to take hits, you got to take them gracefully when you can, because the less time you spend in the negative, because it's going to suck, right? Because across that whole time, you might have, little, $24 here. You might have, you might have like, $75 here, maybe you had to get gas, and then, there's groceries, and then, 180 for some surprise thing that you forgot about. Now I'm putting negative numbers here, and I shouldn't be, because I put I'm subtracting them, so it's trying to add the number. There we go. So each time you take one of these fees, as another $35, right? So here you go negative, you take a $35, $35, $35, $35, $35, $35. So rather than taking, what is this one? We'll just sum them up, right? Let's just sum that equals sum. Oops. F2 to F32. That's an extra $210 in insufficient fees because you went negative earlier in the month as opposed to down here where you had a little more runway. So if we were to fix this and just move this down to here, I'll just put it here. I'll just manually erase it. Right? Now, if you were to be able to shift that date back, okay, you wouldn't take this one, you wouldn't take that one, you wouldn't take that one, you wouldn't take that one, and you wouldn't take that one. So you will have saved $180 almost just by not necessarily getting out of this payment, but you will have you've gotten out of all the extra stuff, the unnecessary add-ons that are already punishing you for not having money. So it's little things like that that can add up pretty significantly, and you're giving yourself two major advantages here in that you're giving yourself extra time to come up with this, and you're avoiding all those extra fees if you have to go negative. So it's super important to just be aware of where your money's going and when and how fast, and then just figuring it out, because a reasonable budget should ideally have a bigger inflow than outflow, right? If that's not the case, you're in survival mode, and you need to figure out a way to make that happen, and that's going to be a balancing act between your inflow and your outflow. So again, let's pump this back up, right? Let's be pretty reasonable about this. Let's say we get rid of this account altogether. Maybe it makes like 27 cents, right? Let's say it's a savings account and it just gets us a little bit of interest here. It doesn't really matter. Let's say you've got a credit card payment right there, $450 right off the bat, right? And then you've got your, insurance payments, and then, well, I guess I'd be using the number over here. So what's that? N4, right? So basically the key here is that we want to assign them here and then reference them over here so that we, if something changes, for example, like if we can get our insurance down, right, to maybe 600 or something like that, we can then reference that and it'll cascade across the sheets, because what we're going to do here is now we're going to say, here's January 26, and then we can duplicate that, because the set schedule of these recurring payments should stay the same, or it should be similar, right? Then you can make another sheet, call it February. Then you can make another sheet, call it March. And then you can just do the same thing over and over and over again for the next 6 months. Okay? And then if something changes, let's say that, February, your insurance goes down to 600, right? And then March, just update it, 600. And then April, 600. Right? That will cascade across all the numbers. And what you can also do is you can reference between sheets, but that's a little more advanced. But the idea here is that if you've got all these specific expenses and you've got these specific inflows, ideally you have some left over at the end of the month, okay? And that number that you have left over at the month can get bigger for most people, okay? And a lot of that's just going to be cutting out all the extra fees that you don't really have to pay, or negotiating for better rates, or taking advantage of loyalty programs, retention promos, whatever your approach is. It's important just to go for that stuff first, and then if you have to make lifestyle changes because you're forced to, then you got to focus on that, okay? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how much sense does this make so far for those that are in the chat here? I know I kind of went through a lot of stuff, but do you guys see the advantage in having it written down and put in front of you so that you can manage the cadence of those things? Oh, I got a couple 10s. All right. I like that. Thank you guys. And this is something you can all put in place today, right? Now, making the spreadsheet, that might suck. but we can help you with that. That's the advantage of having a community here. You need a pie chart? You can do that. Once this is in here, you can do that. I think it's absolutely worth building a pie chart just for your expenses, because you want to see those bigger chunks. You want to see what's going on there. And you can also make charts for individual things, like your mortgage payment, for example. How much is going towards your principal and how much is going towards the interest? Is amortization appropriate for you? And then you can look into the specific terms of that with your bank and say, oh, this bank doesn't want me to pay it off early because they want that longevity. So is there a fee attached to amortization payments? And that's another hidden fee. It's another hidden cost. Rain Man Brain is just bouncing from number to number. And that, color code and make it bold and all that good stuff if you want. And the cool part about this is once you're trying to build a set of financial habits, what you can do is, what's today, the 18th? As this continues, you can just mark this off with a color. Just change your color. You can make your inflows maybe a nice bright green, so that you can see when they're coming in. But each day, this is like a little advent calendar where you're just covering it up after you're done. And these expenses are out of the way. They're behind you. So this is your current balance. This is what you can use. And then, that in 2 days, you're going to have this car payment coming out, for example. And then after that, you're going to have this payment here, which is something. Maybe it's a grocery. Maybe it's a grocery thing. All right. And I kind of was hoping to have a little more time here because I wanted to go through all the like the meal prepping and the grocery budgeting and stuff. But I'm definitely over my time here and I'm going to get yelled at. So, but I just want to make sure you guys are clear on A, the role of money, B, the importance of money flow, and C, some specifics so that you're not just, oh, I know I should do better, but I can't quite figure it out. I want you guys to have specifics because that's what's going to make you more efficient. And I want you to have to try to figure it out on your own because that's what's happened so far, right? Again, we're just kind of left to the wolves to figure this stuff out. So I know this was kind of rudimentary. It was a lot of kind of lower level financial literacy stuff. But again, this is stuff that not everyone's taught. Again, if you're just coming out of prison and you've been in there for 10, 15 years and you went in as a juvenile, you're not going to know this stuff. No one's going to teach you that unless you take a specific course while you're locked up, and then applying it's completely different because you've never really been out to do that. If you're someone who's just made a bunch of money and you never really thought about it, you're kind of in the same boat. You're not going to pay attention to this stuff because you've always just kind of paid it and never really thought about it. But then maybe you're struggling with making contributions, elsewhere. Maybe you're just paying too much for insurance or something. It's one of those things. Maybe you're trying to save up. So maybe you're kind of in between. Like maybe you want your kid to go to college, but you're kind of struggling to commit money to that, even though you make a bunch. There's always room for improvement when it comes to finance. And sometimes it just takes visibility, log into all your accounts, look at all your statements, pull everything for the last year and just go through the recurring expenses and just map them all out. And you'll know exactly what you're spending and exactly when. And just having that knowledge of upcoming expense can take a lot of the emotional part, a lot of the emotional stress out of it. Like this right here, if this is my bank balance, if I had $1861.73 and I knew I had a $458 expense coming up, that's a lot less stressful than if it just hit me one morning and, oh man, yesterday I had $1861, today I've got $1,400. What the hell happened? Because then I'm gonna when I go look and I'm like, oh, okay, it's that, and then I have to wind myself down. If I'm in that kind of state, especially if I'm struggling, month to month, and then as soon as I'm calmed down, it's like, oh crap, we're down to $1,200, and then before you know it, that's a 33% quote unquote loss. You're really just paying for your stuff, but that might be a car insurance and an insurance, auto loan and an insurance payment, but you've just spent 33% of what you had in the bank. And you don't really see a tangible benefit until you go looking and then realize it's your car and insurance. And then this thing, this monster insurance payment, just hits you and it knocks out $900, which is 75% of what you had, towards the end of the month. And then you've got maybe $300, maybe you don't. Maybe you spent $500 up here because you wanted to get stuff on Amazon and didn't really plan ahead because you didn't expect this one to be so late in the month. You know, you're like, oh, I got a week left. I get paid on the 1st, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's little traps like that we can avoid because, you know, your bank charges you fees. Some of the companies charge you fees. If you miss, you know, credit card payments or loan payments, that can affect your credit score. It's a nasty cycle, and it's very easy to fall into. And if you have a roadmap that says, hey, I know that I have to keep at least, $850 in this account until this day, which means I can only spend $373.02 until then I'm not gonna open up Amazon and start looking at $500 things. But being able to make that decision because of your forecast and because of knowledge and clarity can make a world of difference for you if you're in this kind of state. Okay? You make way too much money to be broke. Yeah. Well, I mean, it could be, but taxes, I mean, I guarantee everybody here is paying way too much for taxes. So it's good stuff. So with that said, I'm going to open it up to some Q&A here, and then I gotta end this recording before I get screamed at. Do you guys have any questions? Again, I was kind of hoping to have a little more time here. I really wanted to go into the the grocery budgeting stuff and provide like a real sample budget here. And always make sure that you have a description column for these expenses too, so you know exactly what they are. And you can, if you really pay attention here, you can see I've got this $850 on here twice. That's the kind of oversight that we want to catch when we're making these budgets out, because, you know, it might be Hulu, it might be $18.99, and you might have another $18.99 here. If you look at the spreadsheet, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't fit. And then before you know it, you got 2 Hulu accounts and you just didn't know that. Does it mean you spend too much? Fair enough. But that's something we can work on. Yes. All right, so again, really quick Q&A, maybe for like a couple of minutes, and then I gotta jump off of here. Has there been great? You've been great. I'm glad you're here. And again, sorry to anyone that's watching the recording for that second slide, because I just cut that. I thought I unmuted my microphone, but OBS lied to me. Just kidding. I take accountability on that. But I'm glad you guys were able to hang out and to see it, and hopefully it helps. If not, then we'll do more in-depth stuff and the budget builder stuff. But I think and I hope that right now this is enough to build the foundation and get everybody kind of at least focused on what money is and kind of how it flows. Because again, if you don't think about this stuff, your money just belongs to whoever comes for it first, and it's going to get messy sometime. Especially in the event of like an emergency. You know, if you have a big emergency expense, maybe your water heater explodes, maybe there's a house fire or something, maybe a relative really needs assistance, and that kind of taps you financially. If you don't have this engine in place and visibility of your expenses, it could get really ugly. So it's always worth focusing on. Okay. And this also translates to, paying down credit cards and prioritizing which debts you pay off first, because that also matters. That's part of the cadence. If you have the opportunity to pay off a high interest credit card, that extra interest that you've been paying, that can cascade nicely once that card is paid down or paid off, because you're no longer just giving it to this company unnecessarily. You can use that money to pay more towards the principal, or pay off another credit card, or pay off your vehicle, or pay off something, or just get a better diet in place because you're constantly having to make skimpy decisions on your groceries, little things like that. And then we can also incorporate coupons and promos and things like that when we go shopping, and just everything that we save can be applied to something else, and every little inch that you can crawl forward is worth it if it's something that you can do reliably and easily. Okay, making a spreadsheet, it's a bit of a tech curve, but once you figure it out, it's pretty easy. We can help you, obviously. But, opening up your bank account and looking at a list of transactions, that's not too difficult. It might be an emotional journey, but, just looking at numbers and lines shouldn't be too difficult, and just putting them on paper. Visibility was something I need to hear. Yeah, I hope that helped then. Just put whatever is left after bills on debt until one day there's nothing left and I have to panic work overtime. There you go. That sounds sustainable. I mean, it works though. I mean, you're putting it on debt, but is there a better cadence that you can implement? This has helped. I'm happy to hear that, man. That's good stuff. Now we just got to apply the specifics. All right, good stuff. I appreciate you guys. All right, let me end the recording, and then I'm going to wrap this up here. I'll upload this to YouTube, and then I have to kind of eat my foot on that muted section, but hopefully we have enough information in here for people. And then next couple episodes here, we're going to go through more realistic budgeting, because I just kind of threw these numbers in here. And some of the strategies that we can use when it comes to reducing recurring expenses, and we'll just put more specifics in place, and then we'll go through the grocery budgeting, and we'll try to get more and more people into the budget builders community, and then we'll rock and roll. It'll be pretty awesome. Then we'll start focusing on credit, and I think that's where people's brains will start to explode in a good way. So I'll end the recording here. Thank you all for watching. Appreciate it.